There's a tentative ceasefire in Gaza. Trump loses out on his Nobel Peace Prize, and we got to talk a little bit about AI. So, with all that at hand, I am your host, Sal Asante. This is the We the Patriots podcast, and let's get right into it. So I do not have as much time as I wanted to this week, and I have a lot of prep work to get ready for this show for you guys, the extra show. So don't expect a full episode next week. I got a lot of other stuff to work on, and yeah, I'm excited to bring that stuff to you. So a couple of different things came out. Allegedly, we have a ceasefire agreement in place in the Middle East between, I wanted to say Gaza and Israel. It's Israel and Hamas. I am very happy that it actually went through. I know we talked about it last week. I was a little hesitant. I'm thinking that things would work out. Now, to be fair, there are stages, there are phases to this deal, so multiple points still need to be hit, but hopefully this stays in place. Now, there was, I believe, a counteroffer that was put forth by Hamas, looking out for self-interested things, of course, and I think a little bit more concessions from Israel in terms of how they are going to be pulling out, but there was a tentative agreement. What worried me the most was seeing that how many times over the history of these conflicts between Palestinians and Israelis, and just how many times Israel has broken the ceasefire and in turn, or PLO or anybody else breaks it in turn as well. Directly after, I want to say within hours of the agreement actually becoming existent, there was attacks continuing from Israel into Gaza. And that worried me. I thought that ceasefire deal would be moot point and would be right back to fighting, but it seems like things have calmed down. Could not be more grateful to hopefully put this behind us. As we've talked about multiple times, this was Israel's longest ongoing conflict in the history of the nation, going back to 1948 and going on 2 years and even past 2 years in the past week. Yeah, just to see this be over is very good news to hear from me. Now the rebuilding plan is going to have to take place, and all of the different changes that are going to have to come up as well. And we're gonna have to wait and see what that reconstruction looks like, how much aid is allowed in, and who is doing the rebuilding, and on whose behalf, and who is claiming to be in control of a place like Gaza. It's a very interesting time, and there's really no other way to put it. You know, we saw that AI video that was put out by Trump himself of Trump's Gaza and all of this. I don't think that that's going to come to fruition. That being said, something that's on the table. Again, something to keep an eye out on. Now, amidst this and the brokering done by Trump and the United States in general, Trump's claim of ending 7 wars, or now I guess it's going to be 8 wars, Trump was continuously coming out and claiming that he was deserving of the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, however you feel about that being warranted or not, my biggest thing is, well, there's a couple of things. Number one is that the Nobel Peace Prize went to President Obama after all the things that he did in the Middle East, the amount of drone strikes that he warranted, the innocents that were killed at his behest and his decision making. I really don't think that the award carries the amount of weight that maybe it once did. I mean, to be fair, I believe that the maker of the atomic bomb, or one of them, was given a Nobel Peace Prize, so it has a conflict in its own name, to be fair, but I think that the Peace Prize has lost a lot of its gusto, so to speak, and Trump missing out on it, I think, really doesn't matter. Now, it matters to him, matters to his ego, of course. I think we all kind of understand that, and its rawest form. But with all that being said, I don't think it's really a big miss out that Trump did not win it, and he did not win it. It recently got announced that a Venezuelan opposition to Maduro, Venezuelan leader by the name of Maria Corina Machado, she actually won the Nobel Peace Prize. Again, given that it's lost its luster, I don't really know that it's really all that impactful, but to be fair, reading through what I did about her, it seems like it actually may have been very warranted. Trying to maintain some semblance of democracy in Venezuela. She is currently in hiding, obviously trying not to get killed by the Maduro government. So, you know what? At the end of the day, if I was able to speak to Trump, if he ever saw this, you didn't miss out on much. If you are actually doing what you claim to be doing, I think people will recognize your ability to broker deals and conflicts the most. And I think that goes back onto something that I didn't actually get to touch on last week, and I apologize for that. But it is the fact that one of the biggest things that Trump ran on and his running mates all ran on was this push for peace across the world, whether you're talking about Israel and Hamas, whether you're talking about Ukraine and Russia, or you're talking about other conflicts that aren't in the headlines every day. He was supposed to be the candidate for peace. And until I believe it was 3 or 4 days ago now, until that point, Trump did not achieve any of those goals. And it was one of those things that on the campaign trail, obviously, he was bloviating and exaggerating his ability to stop these conflicts in a quick amount of time. That didn't happen. It's not going to happen. These are complicated things that the United States can have its own opinion on, but we are half a world or even a world away. We don't have the ability. It doesn't matter who the president is. We don't have the ability to just stop a war immediately unless we're going to give probably some terrible people a lot of money and guarantees, and that's just not going to happen. So he was obviously bloviating, like I said. He was definitely over-exaggerating what his play could be, and I think the better talking point for him would have been if he was in office that the wars wouldn't have started. You have a much better argument with that than you would saying that you are going to end these wars immediately. Stuff like this takes time. You have to get both people to come to the table if they are unwilling. Like I would say that the Israelis were unwilling to budge whatsoever on things like the hostages and dismantling of Hamas, disarming Hamas, like we talked about last week. Their idea of achieving a peace was very different than that of Hamas. And so when you have those two very different sides of the spectrum in terms of what it's going to take to get to a peace, it's going to be very hard to get those people to the negotiating table. Now, the bloodshed has gone on forever. If I can get a picture, I will put it up right here of just the utter destruction in Gaza, because it's really incredible just how leveled the place is. And, is it like drone footage went over? It was just crazy to me to see it. And there was also someone, I don't know if I'll be able to find this, but who did an overlay of what it looked like before the war in Gaza and after, had one of those sliders where you could see the effects, and the place is just demolished. It is going to take years and years of work. So anyway, in going back to the Nobel Peace Prize and what Trump has to do is really just block out the people who are haters. Try to achieve these deals. One of the hardest parts for me to look at is just how much aid and how much help we've given to the Israelis in order to prosecute this war. And I think that you have a pretty damning piece of the pie there, which is that we as a country, the United States, and all of our money went to a cause that just destroyed a people for years, going on a little bit over 2 years before there was a ceasefire agreed to. And if that's the case, you got a pretty good argument against actually attaining something like a Nobel Peace Prize for someone like Donald Trump. So at the end of the day, and there's a lot of factors there, and we've been sending money over to Israel for decades and decades. So I understand, and it's going to be very hard to stop the tap there. But I think there's got to be, after this altercation, there's got to be a long, hard look at our relationship with Israel, I would hope, from the Oval Office, and maybe looking for an opportunity to not be giving so much military and financial aid. It seems like they, being the Israeli government, do not really care what our opinion is. They're going to go to whatever lengths are needed to achieve their goals. And if that's the case, great, you are your own sovereign nation, but you do not need the United States' help for it. And if I had to compare the two conflicts, which they're very different, but the conflict of Israel and Hamas compared to the conflict of Russia and Ukraine, on one side, we are defending and pouring money into the defensive side of the war. And on the other side, we're actually putting money into the offensive side of the war and supporting that offensive side of the war. So it was interesting to see that dichotomy in our politics and how that bared out. There's still quite a bit of friction in terms of the ability to get Russia and Ukraine and their leaders to sit down and come to grips with the fact that they're going to have to make a deal to end their war. I hope that is next on the docket, given as though Israel is one of the United States' actual allies and recognized allies in the world, whereas Ukraine's not. I am hopeful in the sense that we have achieved a deal now here with Israel and Hamas, and now we can start working on someone who we are not directly tied to, and that is either Russia or Ukraine. It is all a wait-and-see game. It's kind of how politics is, but when it comes down to it, the more lives, in my opinion, and I'm Definitely not the only opinion. In my opinion, the more lives that can be saved and the more things that can be solved at the negotiating table rather than on the battlefield, the better. More and more innocent people getting caught in the crossfire is just not the best way to go about it. So that's all I got to say on that. I will definitely have some more of that, especially in our new series that's going to be coming out by the end of the month. Um, yeah, so I'm going to keep that it. The last thing I want to talk to you guys, this is going to be a pretty short episode, so I apologize, or maybe you'll love it one way or the other. Last thing I really wanted to get into is AI. So as we get into AI, there's a couple of different things that I think we need to consider as a people. This is not just Americans. This is not Chinese, not Russians, Israelis. This is us as people, as human beings. I think we need to take a step back and realize what is happening here. AI, I believe, is putting us in a very vulnerable position as a species. And I think there's a few different reasons for that. And I want to discuss them with you. Number one, when you talk about the AI as we have been brought up in the concept, most people are very familiar with LLMs or large language models. Basically, your chat GPTs, your Groks, your any of these different models that you type something in and it's going to give back a response, basically an enhanced search function. If you were to compare it to like Google, it's going to give you possibly more information, not necessarily better, but more information. When you're talking about that type of AI, although I had many reservations going into it and I still have many reservations now, that is not the AI that I am so concerned about. Though there are concerns to be had. Number one of them, and I think we talked about this with Dr. John Marshall, who I plan on having on again relatively soon and talk about some of this stuff. But when you talk about it in terms of a learning atmosphere, large language models are very detrimental to the growth of students and the ability to educate properly from a teacher and a professor perspective. Why is that? Children obviously are very malleable. If they are able to find something that can in a way, get around basically all mechanisms of checking for cheating and seeing if someone is actually learning, and they can basically get any answer at their fingertips at the click of a button. It reduces the ability of someone to actually be using their own brain and be able to learn, to truly learn, grow their mind, and be able to come up with critical thinking skills. Now, you can make an argument, and I think it's very valid. I would make this argument if I had to go against someone who just made the talking point that I did, and that is that someone who is very skilled at AI usage, and especially in the large language model sphere, someone's very skilled, they could use it as a way of propelling their knowledge, getting more basis of information, more access to information at a much quicker speed than having to search through libraries and search through Google searches and all this. And I agree with that. Like I said, if I had to make that argument, I would. But when you are talking about the integrity of being a student and the ability to be academically integral, I think that you take a huge hit by introducing large language models. So that's just one form of AI. The next form of AI, I think, is extremely dangerous. And that is the video creation software that we're now seeing pop up all over the place. Now, you may have seen this start to make music with people who either don't exist or have been dead for some time. You may see speeches that were never uttered by people like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, JFK. You may also be seeing it as manipulating current voices in the world and putting words in their mouth that they never actually said, whether it's someone like Joe Rogan, Donald Trump, Charlie Kirk, who is now dead. This type of AI, I think, is extremely dangerous. And let me tell you why. In the world that we live in now, where we still have a cancel culture, now it's coming more from the right perspective and not hurting people on the right as much as it used to be, but it's being used as a hammer against the left. In this world of cancel culture that we have, videos can be made up with, samplings of, I'm pretty sure some models literally need like a minute of you speaking and they can start turning your voice into anything. You don't need much. Almost anybody in the world at this point who has lived through the smartphone era has a minute of their voice somewhere on the internet, and that could be made into anything. Whether you're talking about something that is like a pro-Hitler speech, something that is talking about pure communism, something that's talking about killing off people or having improper sexual relations, anything like that, you can create this with this AI. And I think it's extremely dangerous for that reason. You can get someone canceled, fired, possibly even arrested with a video that is not real. Another thing that this is being used for, I think quite obviously, is that it's also sending out information that I believe to be quite fake in order to perpetuate narratives on behalf of the government. This AI is sending out either false flag information or information in general that is going to counter the mainstream, so to speak, narrative, or it's going to support that mainstream narrative when it's not actually the case, when there is obvious evidence to either go against the government, go against one of its organizations, or go against a very famous person. They can manipulate video in order to make it look the way that they want it to. And it's a way of manipulating the masses. This form of AI is one of the scariest to me. It's not the scariest, it's one of the scariest. And the next form I'll talk about is the one that I am most scared of. But this form of video creation, I want to just stay on here for one more second. What this can do to society, what this can do to people is, it's hard to think about, but it can truly send us into a really dark time. The way that it can do that, of course, is by turning us against each other. It can start making us think that people that we once looked up to as heroes, as absolute villains, or vice versa. People that we thought, for example, people could be making AI speeches with someone like Adolf Hitler, just to bring him up. And this is extremely dangerous to me. And one of the reasons that I'm finding it extremely dangerous is there was an instance, I should say, probably maybe 3 or 4 months ago. I'm sure most of you who are online remember it. Well, maybe you do. I don't use TikTok, but I got sent videos of this where there was speeches being dubbed from German into English of Adolf Hitler's speeches, whether it was in front of the Reichstag or what have you. And speeches that were taken on video and dubbed into English. Now, as English speakers, we have to assume that they were translated properly, but otherwise they could have been just putting out absolute lies. And we really wouldn't know unless we had someone who saw the original video in German and can explain word for word what he is saying. You can go back and really get people on board with Hitler's way of thinking. Now, there are, the best way, I would say, in order to really try to determine whether someone like Adolf Hitler is a sick person is, unfortunately, to go read the man's writing. He put out, I believe, at least 2 full books, and not short ones either, about the way that he thinks and the way that he wanted to perpetuate his government if he were to take power. And that being said, that might be the only way going forward to determine that, because anything that is speech or is translated or is supposedly really his words could be made with AI, and possibly getting the younger generations hooked on Adolf Hitler's speeches is definitely not the way that I think that the world should be going. No, that's about all I have to say. I think if you can't determine the dangers there, I think that, okay, then maybe we just don't see eye to eye, but I think there's a lot of dangers when it comes to that video AI stuff. And that's not to say that it can't be great for movie making and whatever, but I think that it's extremely dangerous for society. It's going to cut out a lot of people in filmmaking. It has a lot of detriments to it. Now, lastly, what is AI going to be used for? Well, pretty self-explanatory. It's going to be used to create robots. It's going to be used to make things that are going to take over humans, whether physically take them over or whether it's taking over their jobs, taking over our way of life, being the cleaning robot so you don't have to hire a maid anymore, any of these things. And this is the scariest to me, because I think all you have to do is watch one of several thousand movies out there, good or bad, that are depicting a future where robots exist or coexist with humans. And, yeah, it's all sci-fi, but sci-fi is, what's the saying? Like, sci-fi is just 20 years back of reality or something like that. It gets closer and closer every year. There's more sci-fi movies now, but allowing robots to actually have a semblance of humanity rather than doing simple functions and, being able to talk, being able to research stuff for you. Essentially, what you're giving that robot is a brain, and you are allowing it to partake in the human experience. And this is where I see the biggest overall issue with AI. We're essentially I think we as humans are creating our replacement. And I think that that is asinine. I think that we could not make a worse decision. And that being said, we are going full steam ahead with these projects, with these plants, these AI data centers, and all of this stuff that is going against the human experience and what it's like to be a human being. I think it's going to come back to bite us. And I think that it's something that we need to get more into the conversation rather than just saying, well, yeah, it's the next form of technology. What are you supposed to do? People got afraid about the radio. People got afraid about the TV. Yeah, well, the TV wasn't a robot that's going to take over what we're supposed to be doing inside of our own home. Just saying. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit, still on the AI topic, is about the repercussions that are not so tangible, but are tangible. They are not so visible, maybe not so directly visible. And number one on that list is just the amount of money that is getting poured into this stuff in terms of AI research. There were a couple numbers that blew me away when I was looking into this. Number one is just the amount of money that is spent on this stuff. I believe like worldwide, we are projected to spend something like $360 billion in 2025, 60% increase year over year. And that's from companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, Meta. Now, the estimates are that it's going to continue to actually increase at this rate. So you got to expect if it's a 60% increase, we're going to be somewhere around the ballpark of over 500 billion next year and getting towards $1 trillion a couple of years after that. If that's the case, you were talking about massive, massive investment. And where a lot of this investment is actually going into is in terms of controlling their power usage. And their power usage is only going up. If you look at how much US data centers are using, what I actually found was that in 2023, so this is pretty far back from our current consumption, just the data centers used 176 terawatt hours. When you look at that, we're used to saying kilowatt hours for our homes. To put that in perspective, a gigawatt would be 1,000 of a kilowatt. So this would be like saying you're using 176 million kilowatt hours just for the data centers. That's not for the rest of us. That's nothing, man. And that is really scary because what ends up happening due to that is a massive increase in cost for electricity for the rest of us. As I'm sure we are all aware, our society is very reliant upon the energy grid and it's functioning. Whether we like it or not, we have to pay these bills. We have to pay for things like air conditioning, heat in the winter, cooking our food using electricity, storing our food, whether it's in a fridge or a freezer, the phones, the laptops that we're using here, watching television. All of these things obviously require energy, and this energy has gone up just in the last year, allegedly something around 6 to 8% nationwide. And you got to imagine places that are closer to these, you don't have to imagine, it is the truth, that if you are closer to one of these massive data centers, if you are closer to a big city like Los Angeles, New York City, Austin, Texas, all of these different places, your energy has actually possibly gone up closer to 50% year over year. Now, obviously, these increases are unsustainable for us regular people who just need to afford to live, but these giant companies do not care. The amount of profitability that is out there in terms of having a solid AI, whether you're talking about, Meta, you're talking about Google, you're talking about ChatGPT or any of these things, if they can put out the best AI, they are making tons and tons and tons of money. So the incentive there is just money. You're talking about stakeholder capitalism. You're not talking about whether we are looking out for the best for humanity. We've gone so far past that point where now we are looking at what is making the most dollars and cents. And unfortunately, that's how everybody is thinking. And even us regular people have to think like that in order to survive day to day. Seeing energy costs go up as much as they are is going to really disallow that. And that is honestly, aside from the fact that we're introducing robots that are going to take us over, in my mind, this has got to be the scariest aspect of it all, is the fact that we are going to price ourselves out as a species of being able to live any sort of life that is close to what our parents had, what our grandparents had, because we want these fucking robots. So I think we need to talk about this a lot more. I definitely missed a lot on it. I'm not going to ramble too much longer. I got to get out of here, but I love you all. This will be out on Monday, but I will have no show next week. Next week, I'm going to start prepping. May start putting together the show next week, or I may just be finalizing some research. So either way, by the end of the month, we will be having our fun new series starting. Fun might be a joke there, but have our new series starting on the 9/11 attacks, what preempted them, and all of that fun stuff. If you want to go get a preview of that and what it's going to look like, go check out our Substack. That is in the link in the description. And other than that, thank you so much for viewing the show. Thank you for spending some time with me this week, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace out.
I wanna be something, not nothing. Trapped inside my dream and I'm running away from these demons. But the feeling's so good, I'ma keep dreaming.